All right, what is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast. We are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X to recap this week's Mets versus Phillies series, and what a huge one it was indeed. We will get into all of it, as well as all of the other news and rumors over the past few days in Mets land. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel if you have not already for this very podcast, which is now recorded live on Sundays and Thursdays, depending on how these series lined up. This is most likely going to be our, second to last, third to last of the regular season. We probably will have to make the scheduling a little bit different during the off season, but you're going to be getting tons of content no matter what throughout the off season. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But for those of you who are watching on playback in the future, you want to join the conversation, make sure to turn on those post notifications to know when we go live. For those of you in the live chat right now, want to let you know, we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns, every single thought that pops into your head about this team. If you feel like you're being ignored, you're not being ignored. You're just being starred throughout the show, so we can pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Also, remember to follow Mets Weekly on X and TikTok, which mainly features Frank's instant reactions after every single Mets game. Coming towards the end here. We only have about six left, but they're still going. They're still pumping. And, of course, they are titled the Mets Frankly Post Game. For our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on any of your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of these new episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day that these are recorded. Without further ado, let's get into episode number 85, and what an episode it is, or is it going to be, because we are talking about some big stuff right now. We are now have reached the, I don't want to say life-defying, but let's just say the season-defying series that is now coming up tomorrow in Atlanta, which we will get into. But we are coming off a massive, and I mean a massive, series win against the first-place Philadelphia Phillies, holding them off from winning the division for like 2 straight days, I'm pretty sure. And listen, there was some angst, there was some nervousness, but at the end of the day, they got the best of the Philadelphia Phillies in this series with incredible sold-out crowd in Citi Field. I'm pretty sure every single one of these games, or at least close. I mean, the energy was amazing. The atmosphere was incredible. I can't wait to see what it looks like in the postseason. If it does happen, we don't know yet, but we are right now, everything seems to just be going the Mets' way. Everything's coming up orange and blue at this current moment. That's how I feel. And it's a good feeling to have, especially compared to the other feelings that we have had in the past. Now, Frank, I know that you were in attendance for one of these games, correct?
I was at the Saturday game, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So the atmosphere, if you want to let us know of how that felt, how you're feeling about this team right now. I mean, wow. I mean, it was quite the performance. Let's just say that. They pulled it out.
No, I can confirm firsthand that it was packed. There was a lot of people. Everywhere you went, you're basically walking around like a penguin. There's more of a waddle. It's a lot of like horizontal movement, not much like north and south, because it's just people everywhere. Like you're going to get food, you're going to your seat, you're going to the team store. There's just people everywhere. And you could just feel the excitement. And it's kind of like one of those things I've mentioned where like when one happens, the rest follows. Like, obviously, there's that automatic reaction when someone gets a big hit. But what would happen is just like after that big hit happens, like especially when you saw the Acuna and the Alvarez home runs, even Iglesias at bat, like the crowd is still going, like they're still clapping, like they're ready for like the next thing. No, they just see like what's gonna happen next. Even though there wasn't a particular play happening at the time, they were just ready for the next thing. When Edwin Diaz came out and the lights went down and all of a sudden there's purple lights because of City Connect, it was like a WWE wrestler coming out with the way the crowd responded once they heard the trumpets and they saw those lights go down. It was really something I was not expecting to see at a baseball game. But you could just feel it when Diaz came in, and when they were in the 2-strike counts, even in a 1-strike count, everyone's just waiting for him just to punch these guys out. And he did exactly that. So it was so much fun. I really had a great time there. So, I mean, it definitely was a lot of people, a lot of excitement, and the energy was there. And now you've seen yesterday the same thing happened, and you had after the game Met fans going crazy, partying and whatnot. I mean, like down the staircase on Saturday, you had like your "Let's Go Mets" chants, but there definitely, like you said, there definitely is a different atmosphere, a different feeling, just amongst the fans because when you're going against the first place team like this that are battling for the 1 seed in the National League, it definitely is something that can be very like scary in a certain sense. Like the pressure is on you, you're on your home ballpark, you're trying to prevent the other team from clinching. So we've talked a lot about like how are the Mets going to react to these pressure moments, and you don't have your MVP in Lindor, and you're going up against really elite starting pitching in just about every game besides the Taijuan Walker game. And they were up to the task. And you know what? They handled it. They had so many different guys contribute that it was just very nice to see. And it just gives you a much better feeling of what this team is capable of come playoff time. Because, like we said, in a playoff series, you're going to be facing really good pitching just about every single game. So, how do you counteract that? And the Mets did it with good pitching and power hitting, which is we know are the two main ingredients of what makes a successful playoff baseball team. So they definitely showed us signs to be excited as well. So, you know, overall, you have to feel really, really good about what you saw this weekend. And they put themselves in just about as good a position they possibly could for this Brave series that we've been talking about for what feels like months now at this point. They have a really good opportunity here. Like, and they still have a chance to control their own destiny even after. So it's just a really good opportunity for them right now.
Yeah, obviously the Mets have played incredible baseball. We can't deny it. They have played great, especially in the second half, even before then. I mean, and this is led up to this point, and it just seems like they just continue to find ways to win, which is what good teams do, especially with the adversity that they've been facing with Francisco Lindor going down, being the MVP type of piece to this team. And, you know, there was a little bit sense of panic. Let's just say that. But the Mets as a team, we have seen them play as a deep team for a majority of the season where, you know, one guy goes down, the rest of them pick them up. And that has been what a really good team does. And that's what they have showed for a long time. We may not have the full-on flashy names, the best in the business. We may not have the Judge or the Soto or the Otani or the Betts, but we have a team of good players. And when we talk about it, such as, you know, like that full-on effect of, I don't know what that the composition philosophy, what is it, the supplement philosophy or whatever, where good players make a great team, great players make an elite team. Like it, when you're getting these contributions from so many guys on this team, it's really hard to beat. And when you just see every single day somebody else is stepping up in such a big way. And even though we have had some main guys who stepped up big time in this series, this is big time. I mean, these are the types of these are the types of teams that you're going to be playing. If the Mets advance in the wild card round, most likely they will be playing Philadelphia. Maybe they play the Dodgers. These are good teams, and this is what you're going to have to do to try and hold them off. And that they're showing that they have guys on this team. Even though we don't have Andrew for this phrase, but they have dog in them. You know, they're able to grind these things out, and they're able, to string things together and piece together things that we did not really expect, to be honest. I mean, yesterday we had 4 innings from our starting pitcher, and they somehow were able to piece this thing together, holding them off, to finish off the series victory. Now, speaking of more great things, Caution coming in here with a super sticker worth $5.
He's on a streak.
Thank you. If he does it in the next stream, then it will be a dynasty, right? Three times in a row, 3 times, right? Yep. But I'm not encouraging anybody to donate, of course. They're always accepted. You don't have to, but that is
they're welcome but not required.
You're welcome but not required. That's the right vocabulary to use. Anyways, but of course, like the energy it in that stadium. Of course, I was watching on TV. For those of you who don't know, I live about 2.5 hours away from Citi Field, so I can only get down there like once or twice. But when it's, talking about just the full-on atmosphere of a playoff atmosphere where it's not even the playoffs yet. And it makes you kind of scared as to, what is this city capable of a sold out crowd uh, in the playoffs where the stakes are even higher, right? So you never know. And especially with more like, I don't know, a little bit more of a welcoming environment around Citi Field now as compared to what it was 2015 or something. Because we all know like the area around Citi Field. We've talked about this before. It's been something that has been talked about as being invested into. So there's going to be things around there that makes it even more of an attraction. And you hope that every single year you have an atmosphere like this. But of course, we know the grind of 162 games to get there. It seems like this season has been going on for quite a while because it's been quite a roller coaster. But let's just say we are coming towards the end here. We have 6 games left, and the next 3 are going to be very, very important. And I think that a lot of Mets fans are not just nervous, but they're also confident in how this team has played in September. Because let's not forget, I will say, 2022, they were falling apart very quick. Like, not quickly, but like inch by inch, you were starting to see like, okay, the wheels are starting to fall off here. And, we were starting to get a little bit concerned of like, okay, this team has been capable of winning. Maybe they can hold it off. They still were winning a lot of games. They still were good at a good pace. But we were still seeing some signs of like, I don't know, like this team's kind of top heavy. If this guy doesn't hit, no one's going to hit. Well, now, 2 years later, we're looking at a situation where your star shortstop has gone down at the most important part of the season. And this team's still vibing at the top. They're still able to pull out these victories from that one guy that we have in the picture right here on the far right, Jose Iglesias coming in as well. Luis Angel Acuna has been a great story since his debut. Just overall, we're seeing just a great team. We're just seeing a great team on display every single night. And it's really, really encouraging. It may not be perfect, but all the efforts of everybody coming together, I mean, it's just been very, very good, and it's come at such a great time. It always seems like the Mets continue just to be on this path of maybe, maybe not. And then sometimes, this year it seems like they've continued to play timely baseball. And that's kind of how it feels. Yes, of course, in 2022, when people are talking about it, the Braves just played way better baseball. They were playing unsustainable baseball, to be honest. They were just amazing and dominant. But you never really felt safe in any way because you still saw some glaring weaknesses on this team. But when you have this depth like this that has been constructed around this team, I feel good. I do feel a lot better, and I really do personally like this team better than that 2022 team. I'm not gonna lie, I like them a lot better. I feel like mentally they're a lot like they're just there. They're better there situationally, and you just have better role players. I feel like it's just a deeper team. And I do feel confident going into Atlanta, even though there is some of those, thoughts and PTSD of what has happened there. But I don't know. I feel, Frank, I'll ask you like about your confidence level into this team, especially like also asking you compared to 2 years ago. I mean, is it different? Is it more? Do you have confidence in them going into Atlanta, or is this, or are you just feeling like, still have to be cautious of Atlanta because they're just still Atlanta at the end of the day and they've owned us for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely helps that you're not facing all of Atlanta's top hitters. Like, obviously, we talk so much about Luis Angel Acuna, and maybe giving him a shout out here. But yes, we acknowledge him. And listen, that's another observation. As a short person myself, when I was watching Acuna warm up, I'm like, oh my gosh, looks like me out there. Like, and I just love him. I give him so much credit. Like, I'm really, really proud of him. Like, he inspires me. So, like you think of facing Ronald Acuna when going to Atlanta and just like all these great players. It's kind of similar to the Phillies series in a sense where it's like, we're going to get to it, but you're going to be facing elite starting pitching every single day. So, the Mets try their best to kind of match it up with some of their top guys out there, having Severino, having Manaea. So you're going to be in the games for the most part. I would rather have a team that won the wild card hot then maybe won the division and kind of backed their way in and limped their way in, because it's like we always say, the team that's hot is the team that goes further. So, I feel like I'd rather have this scenario, because when you look back on the 2022 team, like Daniel Vogelback was starting in the playoff series. Like he was a starter. Tomas Nido was the starting catcher. Eddie Escobar, my guy, was a starting third baseman. Mark Canha was your starting left fielder. Like, this is a different team, you know what I mean? Like you had an injured Marte. So it really was, like we talked about, it was top heavy in the sense where you're looking at Nimmo, Lindor, and Alonso to really do and you had McNeil bang after Alonso. Like those were the guys that are supposed to be big contributors. But now we talk so much about how the bottom half of the order has been so productive for the Mets, and you have this power hand catcher in Alvarez who's swinging a good bat. We're going to get to him later. You have the rise of Acuna potentially. Iglesias has been phenomenal all year. Tyrone Taylor swinging a hot bat. Like you just feel like you now just have more options of guys that could step up for you. I mean, even game one, Luis Guillorme pinch hit at one point. Like this is just an overall different team in a lot of aspects. And I feel like when the Mets had their series in Atlanta in 2022, when Scherzer didn't come through and you saw all these guys not get the job done, it felt like it was kind of a preview as to what we're going to see in the postseason, because then Scherzer gets bombed against San Diego and everything. So I feel like we kind of have a chance to once again get the sense of, okay, well, what do these guys do in the biggest pressure scenarios, in the biggest games? Because these are basically playoff games, honestly. Like this series against Atlanta is basically like a playoff series. So if Manaea looks really good like he has all year, that gives me confidence that, okay, he could handle a postseason start. And if Severino gets, and I've seen him pitch in the postseason before, but it's like you see Severino come through, it would make you feel better about
now, so we'll see.
Exactly,
how
he's a different pitcher now. But you'd feel better about how they're going to perform in the wild card series. And even this series against Philadelphia was like a playoff atmosphere as well. So, and pretty much everybody in the rotation stepped up for the most part. So I feel pretty good. This team has been, one of the best teams in September since May 30th, since Lindor's team meeting, since Grimace, like whatever callback you want to go to. Maybe best team in baseball record-wise, one of the best teams in baseball. So they've been playing good baseball for a while now. And again, with the pitching coming together, it just feels like they're clicking at the right time.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I think that, just the full-on atmosphere of how, I mean, more of just how Mets fans are they're desperate to get back. They want to see playoff baseball in Queens again, and they're going to have to fight a good fight. Let's just say that. Most likely, if they do make the playoffs, they are going to be playing on the road, and they're going to have to win that series on the road. Most likely it would be against Milwaukee, maybe San Diego or something like that, but they're going to have to win 2 out of 3 from those series. Something that the Mets have been able to do fairly well against some of these contending teams in the regular season. But again, playoffs are a different story. But when you talk about it, it's just like this is an atmosphere that Mets fans want. They want to see this team on the big stage, and they don't want to see 70 wins or, scrape by 80 wins. They don't want to see this mediocrity anymore. And, that type of push, I feel like I think it just comes from, like Brandon Nimmo has kind of like pushed for it of the fans rallying behind them. And I do believe you're going to see it, and forbidding, any like weather situations in Atlanta, you're going to see a lot of Mets fans in Atlanta. I do think you will. You'll see what happens, but I feel like you're going to see them travel pretty far. Because I feel like at this point we know what is at stake here. We're usually not on the good end of things, and we're hoping that it's the situation for things to come, but we got to get over that hump first. So I feel like that it's not really a desperation, but it's just like I just get like the hunger in this team to finally, bring the actual playoff relevance to this team consistently every year, but it all starts with like that 1 year. Because 2022, they made the playoffs and they were one of the best teams in all of baseball. Tail end, they tail spinned a little bit at the end there, and they kind of ran out of gas. But then the next year, there was no sustainability. It all just started off from square one, and then they had to sell at the deadline, and they had to kind of restart and retool. So hopefully this is the start of something, especially with a lot of these young pieces coming up. There looks to be a really bright future from this farm system, even more than we thought or knew. And it's just more of a young energy too, I will say. Let's just say that. I mean, Francisco Alvarez, he has had a tough stretch. Let's just say that, and we'll get into that in a second. But also Luis Angel Acuna coming up here, and Mark Vientos emerging as the hitter that he is. And then you saw a little bit of the young pitching in Christian Scott. Obviously, that's going to have to wait in the future. But you do have some of these pieces that are young that we know that could contribute at this level that can make this team even more electric. And hopefully that youth movement brings up the hunger to continue making these deep runs into the postseason. But as of right now, from what we're talking about now, let's talk about this big series against Philly. Without further ado, now, of course, Game 1, Luis Severino would put up yet another quality start across 6 innings pitched, striking out 7, giving up 3 earned runs, walking 2 on 86 pitches. But this night was all about the offense. The Mets would absolutely destroy their old friend Taijuan Walker, smashing 4 home runs by Mark Vientos, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, and Francisco Alvarez. Nimmo and Vientos would drive in additional runs in the 4th. Luis Angel Acuna would drive in the 10th and final run for the Mets on an RBI triple. The Mets would have a healthy lead, but the Phillies would fight back a bit after Danny Young would only record 1 out and surrender 3 earned runs, but the rest of the bullpen would lock it down from there. Reed Garrett in the 7th to get 2 outs, Ryan Stanek in the 8th, and Edwin Diaz would close it out to take Game 1. Game 2, David Peterson had one of his worst outings in quite a while, unable to get out of the 4th inning, allowing 4 earned runs, 1 unearned, striking out only 4 in just 64 pitches. Jose Iglesias would lead off the first with a solo shot. Brandon Nimmo would add on in the first with an RBI groundout. Marte and Taylor would just get hits, but it was pretty much a shit show from there. Adam Ottavino would come in relief for Peterson, make it even worse, surrendering 3 earned runs, only getting 1 out. Huskar Brazaban and Danny Young would each allow 2 more earned runs each. Even Eddie Alvarez had to pitch in the top of the 9th inning, and he actually did better than most of the Mets staff in this game, as the Mets would lose Game 2 in humiliating fashion, 12-2. But Game 3, the Mets would bounce back once again. Sean Manaea was good once again, continues his great 2024 campaign, allowing just 3 base runners, and all of them would come around to score. But don't get fooled. He went 7+ innings pitched, walked no one, struck out 6 on 89 pitches. Francisco Alvarez would tie the game in the 2nd with a monstrous solo shot. Luis Angel Acuna would follow it up with another solo home run to give the Mets the lead. This game would head into the 7th, tied 2-2, as Brandon Nimmo would drive in the go-ahead run on an RBI single on one knee. It was a great pose there. Francisco Alvarez would provide insurance with a 2-run double in that same inning. Pete Alonso would drive in the 6th run on an RBI bloop single while also getting on base 5 times, including a hit by pitch and 3 walks. The only Met who struggled in this game was Mark Vientos, going 0 for 5 with the platinum sombrero, but Edwin Diaz would lock it down for a 4-out save to secure Game 3, 6-3. Game 4, Tyler McGill would get the start and only go 4 innings pitched after struggling to find the strike zone, driving his pitch count up, but he would limit the damage, just giving up just 1 run, striking out 6 on 83 pitches. Tyrone Taylor would tie the game in the 2nd with an RBI single. Jose Iglesias would have yet another multi-hit game as he continues to stay hot. Vientos and Acuna would each get hits as well, but the big one would come in the 6th as Brandon Nimmo blasted a go-ahead solo shot to give the Mets the lead, and the bullpen would be spotless from there in relief of McGill. Maton would toss two perfect innings. Jose Budo would pitch a scoreless seventh with two strikeouts, and Edwin Diaz would be called upon for a 6-out save, striking out 4, walking 2, but he would finish the job to secure a massive 4-game series win over Philly. That now puts the Mets at 87-69 with a 2-game lead on Atlanta for the final wildcard spot, and also tied with Arizona for the second wildcard spot, with their magic number now moving down to 5. That was a lot of talking for me. I'm going to have to drink some water. But full on takeaways from this series. I mean, there was a lot to like. There's pulled it out. I mean, it was great. I mean, again, we talked about the atmosphere, but just technical details of the game. I mean, they really showed out against a really, really good Phillies team.
Yeah, no, I mean, there definitely was a lot that happened in this game, and that's how it's always going to feel in a 4-game set. And they get it started off on the right foot, and like I sent the tweet about it, but after seeing how the Mets performed against Taijuan Walker in Philadelphia, where he comes out of the bullpen and he throws 3 scoreless innings, then this time around, in the span of like 3 1/3, he's giving up 7 runs. And it's like, okay, this is much more like what should have happened compared to what happened in Philadelphia. And then you end up with a nice 10-piece on the board and kind of keeping their streak of scoring 10 runs. So that was very exciting, like a great start to the series. And then the next game, as you said, everything just kind of hit the fan. Things went really wacky. I blame that it was on Apple TV. Couldn't even see the game anyway, so does it really count? P. Alonso doesn't know how to catch a pop-up. And it was just very interesting. Like, I want to get to the bullpen. I feel like was also like a big storyline in this series because there was some bad and there was some good here. And for Mendoza to pull Peterson early, I understood it, even though I felt that it wasn't hard contact that Peterson was giving up. It was just that he was giving up too much contact. Like, he just wasn't missing bats. So whether these guys are hitting rockets or they're just hitting a bunch of dimps and dunks and things like that, runs are runs. So he felt like he had to pull him. But to pull him for Adam Ottavino is where things are. That's where it gets a little tougher. Like, I understand you want to pull Peterson because he's not doing great, but to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to go to Ottavino instead. That's the part that I didn't really love with how many left-handed hitters Philadelphia has. They've talked so much about, like, Ottavino is much better against righties, even though he gives up the homer to the righty anyway. So, to go to Ottavino, like, in the 5th inning, 4th inning, like, that was, I understood it, but it definitely didn't end up working out, as then, your whole bullpen gets destroyed. Braziban follows it up. Just all these guys. Danny Young was struggling in this series. Like, it just was a lot. And that's one of those instances where I've said for a while, but if a game is going like that, that's where the benefit of the long man instead of an Ottavino shows its value, or an Alex Young, who did we even see in this series? I don't even remember. Maybe we saw him like at the very end when they were getting blown out. So I feel like you could just get more use because then you're not using all your other guys, and then Eddie Alvarez had to pitch. But then in the first game, even though the offense is doing really good, Danny Young's trying to make it close. And then Saturday, you build a nice lead, and then Reed Garrett wants to make it close. So there definitely was some of those middle relief problems that we've seen in the past that showed up, and is what led to Carlos Mendoza just going full out Edwin Diaz in a way that I don't think we've ever seen Edwin Diaz be used before, in the sense of he's going an inning and a third on Saturday after already pitching on Thursday, and then the next night he goes 2 innings. We have not seen Diaz have that kind of workload before, but he responded to it really well, and man, did they need it after what happened the last time they're in Philadelphia and some other games have gone away due to everybody in the bullpen, but Diaz as well. He really, really bailed them out because they showed that, listen, we can't trust Stanek, we can't trust Garrett, we can't trust Danny Young. They had to pull McGill early because it's high pitch count from the first inning. So they had to use Maton for 2 and already use Budo. So that was kind of all they were left with. It was like, Diaz is all we got. and he came through. So I give major props to Diaz, but I did not like what I saw from Danny Young, from Reed Garrett, from Ottavino, and some of these other guys in the middle relief roles that made it to the point where you really had to extend Diaz. And I wonder how that affects him for this Braves series. Even though Mendoza did say it's big boy time after the game, they do have the off day tomorrow. But I do wonder, like, what is that? How is he going to utilize him for the rest of the season? Because after what I saw, I feel like he's just going to go all out. And I mean, at this point, I can't blame him. But as I've said with other things, it's that could only get you so far. I feel like it comes because even though as good as Diaz can be, it becomes a little unrealistic when you expect that much out of a relief pitcher, especially if it's not like a starting pitcher. I think of like the way the Giants did with Madison Bumgarner, one of their World Series runs where you could just have him go like almost every game, a bunch of innings and good. I don't think they could do that with Diaz since he's a reliever. So I feel like they kind of still need these other guys in the bullpen to really come through for them. As I've said 100 times, Daniel Nunez's injury really stinks. But I really like what I saw from Maton, though. I mean, I tweeted it, but I was a little surprised that they went to Garrett on Saturday. I would have went Maton there. I think with Garrett, even though his stuff is overall better, I feel like he's one of those guys that his stuff could be a blessing and a curse where he's susceptible to the walk issue and also hanging stuff over the plate for home runs. Whereas I feel like with Maton is a much safer bet. And I feel like with a 3-run ball game, I just think it would have been a lot smoother. Maton could give you that inning, and then you don't need that extra up down for Diaz. But that's just the way I saw it.
Yeah, of course. I think that there was definitely some. I'm not going to say controversial. I just feel like there was definitely like a half and half. I would say when it goes with the bullpen decision, like there were some moves that I liked, some I disliked and didn't really understand. As much as I can go after David Peterson as much as I can in that second game, it was Ottavino who lost him that game. I will say that I'm not going to go after saying, oh, David Peterson, yeah, okay, he didn't have it, whatever. But then Ottavino comes in here and just basically just cuts open the wound and we just bleed out to death. Like that's literally what happened in that second game. And we all know that that's what Ottavino does these days. Like that's literally what Ottavino is. So I'm not surprised. Does it still make us question why the hell he's even still here? Yes, absolutely. But when you talk about just the Mets, like in general of how they played out this series, it was played with a sense of urgency every single game. Even though David Peterson was pulled early, that's usually what happens when a guy doesn't have it in a playoff game and they put in somebody else. The guy that they put in being Adam Ottavino, not the best move. Again, just wasting up a roster spot because he's Adam Ottavino and he's pretty much been useless all season. Different point. But it was treated like a playoff game. And I'm glad that they did. They had a sense of urgency. I understand that there were some kind of like questions as to where, I don't know, what was it in Toronto where they're like, oh, why is Eddie Alvarez starting in the middle of a playoff race? That makes absolutely no sense. But then they were like, oh, wait, this doesn't work, so let's not do it again. And they didn't do it again. He did not make any more starts for them. Like, yeah, they tried to place it in, maybe try to catch lightning in a bottle, but we all know that his bat, it's not a major league bat. He's here to provide defense and speed. That's what he's here for, to make the defensive options a little bit deeper. So when you're looking at it from how they did it, from strategy of using guys, I think they did a really good job piecing things together, especially with the circumstances. Let's just say that, especially in that last game. I know there were, I knew a lot of people were like disagreeing with pulling Tyler McGill as quickly as they did. He was up to like 83 pitches or whatever. Again, I am, I will always be someone who will, I don't know if, I guess I'm a McGill apologist. I don't know. I'm someone who will always have a soft spot for Tyler McGill. But in that current circumstance of what Tyler McGill was kind of giving you on the mound that entire time, the Mets really couldn't afford another inning from Tyler McGill. They just really couldn't. He couldn't find the strike zone for 4 innings. He was able to limit damage because he still had good swing and miss stuff, but the pitch count was just getting too high. you're playing against a Philly team that is so good against so good in these situational hitting, which is the main reason as to why they've made these deep playoff runs. You can't afford another 30 pitch inning from Tyler McGill. It just couldn't happen, especially with how Wheeler was pitching. I mean, Wheeler was like, I mean, he made like 2 mistakes that entire game. I mean, 2. That's it. And he's an ace for that. That's what aces do. So the way that they had to win this thing in the margins was to take Tyler McGill out. And I agreed. I agree with that move. I definitely do. As much as I would like to say I'm so confident in Tyler McGill, we've seen him blow up before. It's not like that has never happened. I may say that like, oh, well, he's the greatest of all time, and I may say that he's the next ace of this staff, but in reality, we've seen him blow up before. We have seen him, especially, I don't know, after 4 innings, after 3 innings, completely dismantle. So the fact that they pulled the plug where they did with the pitch count going up, I think that was the right move to make, and it turned out to be the right move to make. Not to mention, they were in a good position with an off day the next day. They had a fully rested bullpen, but they also went for 6 outs with Edwin Diaz to give him that test. And let's just say, as the Diaz fan that I am, I freaking loved it. I loved that they finally said, you know what? He is a $102 million reliever. Let's treat him as such. Edwin Diaz has said that I don't care when I pitch or how much I pitch. I want to be out there, and I will be ready. Something that Josh Hader, has kind of sacked off of. But he got his money. Diaz got his money, and we have to prove that he is worth that $102 million, and that's what he just showed you. He got you the 6-out save. Again, Edwin Diaz has not been the effective Edwin Diaz from 2022. We know that, of course. But as it continues to elevate, I'd much rather him succeed in September than compared to April, where he was still trying to figure stuff out. We're starting to see it sharpen up a little bit. Let's just say that. He's starting to throw a little bit harder, more fastballs. Slider starts to be a little bit more crisp. He's going to get there. And hopefully he does get there come postseason time. And I was so happy. I was so happy to see, them just go, okay, well, let's treat this like a playoff game. This is a 1-run game. And we are going to give Edwin Diaz the ball to get 6 outs. And to hear Carlos Mendoza say what I've been saying for a while going into September, where, talking about the confidence of Edwin Diaz and, basically saying that, it's big boy time. We've let him ramp up all year. He's coming off of a very serious injury. Yes, that is true, but it's time to go. We need our $102 million reliever. And that's the type of mindset that's been put out by Carlos Mendoza. And I agree with it 100%. I really do. And, I think that going off of just, him blowing a game and have him just dwell on it for 3 days because, he didn't get the result. So let's take him out of there and we won't see him for the next 5 days. Let him meditate. No, go back out there. I was glad to see that, because we all know how Edwin Diaz gets into his head. The less time that he spends with spends in his head, the better. Let's just say that. Andrew has landed in New York, which is the same state as me and Frank. If you guys find him, please spit on him. We don't like him. Okay. But when it comes to just the full-on takeaways from this series, we got to end it off the best way that we can, and that being studs and duds. I'm putting it here at the right point. One player in this series that was great, and we would like to raise a glass to and celebrate. One player that was not good, and we want to completely throw under the bus. Now, Frank, I'll go to you. Your stud for this series. Who do you got?
Yeah, so you know who I want to pick, but we have a whole segment dedicated to him, so I'll save it
Yeah.
for that. So instead, I'm going to take Brandon Nimmo. I feel like he was kind of involved in everything. He had the big home run last night against Wheeler, like you said, an elite pitcher, getting the big hit when needed. Because the Mets had opportunities in this game, just weren't able to come through for the most part. But Nimmo got the big one, and he was just involved in everything. And Saturday, he's involved. He hits the big home run in the first game, so it was very nice to see him step up and getting all like these post game interviews on ESPN. Obviously, he made the big speech going into the series after the big Nationals game he had. So he's really stepping up as a leader. And I feel like with Lindor being out and them trying to make this whole big last day of Pete at Citi Field and trying to make this whole drama, like him really stepping up in more of a leadership role publicly, I thought was really nice to see as well. So I got to give Brandon credit. It's obviously been a struggle for him in the second half, but if they can get him going leading into the playoffs, hitting for power, that would definitely be a very nice addition to the team and could really help them get much further.
Yeah, there's one thing I will say. It's we talk about what made Michael Jordan so great. Talking as much as you do. It's all talk until you back it up. And Brandon Nimmo, he said, "Okay, fans, come on out here. We need you out here for the energy." And he backed it up. He backed it up. He was one of the top performers in this series, and he was great. I mean, he came through when we needed him to come through multiple times. He homered twice in this series, I think. Twice?
Yes, twice.
Twice?
Yep.
Yep. Twice in this
And he
series.
had the RBI hit on Saturday as well.
Had the big
Well,
hit.
like you said,
He had the
falling to
big
knee.
big hit in the third game as well. I mean, he came through when it mattered, and yes, he has been struggling, but it's good to see him heating up when it matters. Again, like if you're gonna come through at one point, we better be when it matters and not when we're in garbage time. So obviously, Brandon Nimmo, great pick. That was actually the guy that I was going to pick because again, he was on the dud category for a while. Let's just say that he was in the dud section for a while because he's been struggling. But I'm glad to have him back in there because again, there's nobody more likable than Brandon Nimmo. Let's just say that. And I mean, it's good to see him getting it going. But I have to go to possibly the hottest hitter in all of baseball right now, being Jose Iglesias. I mean, holy shit. No, you can't get this guy out. You can't. What does he have? A 17-game hitting streak right now? I mean, he's on fire. And one thing I will say, and I also will kind of co-sign this with Acuna as well, with Lindor going down, of course, we've kind of gotten the tools of Lindor in like the hybrid. You know how like in Moneyball we're gonna recreate a DH or whatever. We're gonna recreate. We've gotten the defense and the contact hitting and the situational hitting from Iglesias. We have gotten the power from Acuna and the defense from Acuna, the base running from Acuna. I mean, it's been incredible to see them just like pick up basically just where they left off from somebody who comes down in Francisco Lindor, who right now, it's up in the air if he does play. But of course, I mean, Nimmo, great pick. You can also put Sean Manaea out there. I'd love to say that because he's just continued to be fantastic.
Diaz.
But as for not fantastic, let's just say, let's go to the duds. Frank, what do you got here?
So I'm going to go with, because I was there and saw it happen and felt it every single time, Mark Vientos with his 0 for 5, 5 strikeout game, chasing inside, outside, up, down, all the way around. He had to be dropped in the order pretty significantly on Sunday. And, his song is about nasty girls or whatever. If he was more focused on baseball and less on the nasty girls, maybe you don't have a 5 strikeout game. So I just think, and he's been good overall. Like, he got the hit yesterday, and obviously he's had a phenomenal season. But just seeing like we talked about, something with the approach and just looking kind of lost in certain instances would definitely be very noticeable when I was there.
We all know about the swing and miss with Mark Vientos. It's just going to come. That's how it is. The chasing still has to get better, of course. But, when things are in the zone, he can do damage to him. And I'm pretty sure, in this series, he did get, I'm pretty sure he like homered twice. He drove in a few, like he was good, but like outshined in that one game. That was a brutal game for him. Like he looked really really bad, and I'm not gonna lie, but I'm glad that he kind of bounced back in the next game. I'm pretty sure he got like 2 hits or something. I'm not sure. Um, yeah, maybe one or two. I don't know. But he definitely had quite a tough performance. Let's just say that in that game three, and Golden Sombrero is not great. Let's just say that. Um, I think that there are a few pieces that like stand out. Of course, Danny Young you can put in there because he just has not really been helpful to get the bridge to Diaz. You can put JD Martinez out there who has just looked lost for like the past few weeks. But I'm gonna go with what the statement that I went with a few minutes ago, and that being the fact that Adam Ottavino took him out of that game. Adam Ottavino was the one who lost them that game, and I understand that they were already losing by the time Peterson came out. And yes, we all know about my relationship with David Peterson, but I mean, David Peterson, what was it, 4-2 at that point, 4-5-2, something like that. It was still a winnable game. Let's just say that. It was still a winnable game. Then in comes Adam Ottavino, and he's like, oh, well, fuck that. We're going home early. Screw that. And, he just completely took us out of that game and basically just sucked the air out of the entire stadium. Let's just say that. But, again, there was a lot of positive in this. A few other notes that I want to go to. Of course, the Pete Alonso story. Can I just say, first of all, we're in the middle of a playoff race. Like right now, I don't care. I do not care what his future is right now on this team. And I understand there are some sentimental Mets fans out there that would disagree. But when it comes to when it comes to the Mets right now and the situation that they're in, the way that it was kind of skewered on ESPN, and we already know how they skewer things all the time, it basically looked like this was the Mets' last game of the season. The Mets are out of the playoffs, and this could be the final game that he plays as a Met, which is just not true whatsoever. They even asked Carlos Mendoza during the game, which interviewing during the game is just absolutely ridiculous, especially with the manager trying to manage the freaking game. But with Carlos Mendoza, they basically asked him about Pete's final game. And of course, he said, okay, well, it's not going to be his final game because we're going to come back here. Like, he has confidence in the team, which is great to hear. I'm not going to lie. Like, when Buster Olney asked him about that, I was kind of expecting, it wasn't going to happen, but I was kind of expecting Carlos Mendoza, who has been very, very honest and very straightforward all year about this team. He hasn't lied once. I mean, even though backing up a player or whatever, I was really expecting him to say, why the hell would I give a shit right now? I'm managing a playoff race. Like, I was literally waiting for him to say that. And I don't know if it was like I don't know if it's just like it was kind of an annoyance to him, because I was looking at his facial expressions when they were asking him, and he's like looking at him like, really? Like, this is the middle of a playoff race and this is what we're talking about? Pete Alonso's contract? Like, right now, I don't care. Like, I don't care right now. I don't care what happens with Pete Alonso. I care what happens about this team, of them winning and getting to the playoffs. It's just so ridiculous how they just spun this narrative the entire game. Not to mention, Pete Alonso was so bad last night. He struck, what was it, 3 times he struck out? I mean, come on. Like, this is ridiculous. This whole narrative of like, okay, well, 2019, he had this incredible year. That's over now. 2019 was years ago. We're talking about this right now. And even Pete Alonso said, it's about us and everything. But it's like, just why? Why is this being made a story right now? I get it. It's Citi Field. He's got the most home runs at Citi Field. He's got the, he would break the, and he would break the whole, he would break the home run record if he stayed or whatever. And we know we have this whole storyline of like, oh, the Mets don't keep any of the homegrown guys or whatever. But it's like, at this point, I don't care right now. Like, we're focusing in this this position where it's do or die. Every single one of these games counts. This was a playoff game. It was a one-run game. We were biting our nails throughout the entire thing. It was entertaining. It was a great atmosphere. But, like, this is what we're talking about? Oh, well, Pete Alonso, this might be his final game. And I'm just, I'm sitting there. I'm like, who cares? I get it, like, as a Mets fan perspective. But I'm like, who cares? Like, is that what you're, like, I don't know. You agree with me in that sense? It's like, why is this a story right now? Who actually cares? If the Mets were out of the playoffs, fine. But they're in the thick of a playoff race, and this is the main thing? It's like, it's ridiculous. The way ESPN carries this stuff is insane.
Yeah, I think ESPN was just looking for something to talk about. They're looking for some kind of drama, just something, because why on the SNY broadcast or the Fox broadcast or the Apple TV, like, they weren't talking about this constantly. Like, we saw 4 separate broadcasts in 4 days, and only this one was the one going on and on about it. I get that was the last game, potentially, but still, no one was talking about it leading up to, oh, Sunday is going to be perhaps the last day. Like, they just were going on and on and on about it. And like you said, it was really taking away from what the story should have been. And it's like, no, here's a team that was 11 games under 500 and looked like it was over, and they were 0 for 5 to start the season, and things were going terrible. And now look at where they are right now. They've been the best team in baseball for months. Like, just a matter of what they want to talk about. And the same thing happened in the Seattle series. Like, they never, for whatever reason, they say, but I mean, this is not the first time we see it. I'm not the least bit surprised, because this is what they do. I mean, they're just looking for attention. They're looking for whatever, eyeballs, clicks, whatever it is they're after. That's what they do. I mean, that's what their whole program revolves around, as far as all their different programming. So they were just trying to do the same thing on the baseball broadcast.
Well, it was nice to get a huge series win in front of Buster Olney's face. That was pretty fun. Let's just say that. But again, let's just talk about the main excitement. Let's just say that. And we all know that the excitement always comes from youth. And we have a young catcher who recently has been fantastic. I mean, it seems like he's found the power stroke once again after a little bit, maybe an identity crisis. I don't know. He's had an injury this year. Maybe he's just gripping the bat better, possibly with that thumb. I don't know. It's been quite a wild year for Francisco Alvarez, but he had a homerless drought that lasted over 100 plate appearances. And once he broke that, we started to see a lot better of just overall, not just quality of contact, just overall better contact, and just a better approach at the plate as well. Now, as for just some reborn power, let's take a look at some of these batted balls that he has had. I just want to show, everything highlighted in red is considered a hard hit by StatCast metrics. 95 or higher miles an hour is considered a hard hit. These are listed by exit velocity. Of course, we are seeing those 5 home runs, but we are also just seeing him hit the ball a lot harder, especially against velocity. We're still seeing him go in and out with some of the breaking stuff, but we already know that has been a struggle, especially against the right-handed hitters for a lot of the Mets hitters. But just overall, as someone who I would say I have overall concerns with the quality of contact from Alvarez, not really just of what he can provide, but of the consistency of it, which we have seen throughout his entire Major League career so far, where it's just been very streaky. It really has just been a very streaky offensive production. The way that we have kind of seen him hit home runs in bunches, I feel like he probably should be going after home runs a little bit more. Again, that's just my opinion, where he, I don't know, like a power first prospect should be hitting for power. I don't know. That's just like a hunch. All right. What do I know? I've never been right before. But when it comes to Alvarez, we already know. And I hate to put this as like I told you so in this purpose to a certain individual that we all know who I'm pointing to. But like, let's just talk about this for a second where Alvarez, the only times that he's really contributed to the Mets offense has been with his power. So why don't you let him use it? And yes, maybe there would be a little bit of an overswinging and maybe a little bit of chasing, but he's a young player. So obviously, you wait for your pitch to destroy the pitch. I want to see him do damage of anything in the zone because I know he's capable of that. And that's what we've been seeing recently. Hopefully, he can keep it up. I mean, we all know that if we see this type of production in the postseason, the energy that it will supply from Francisco Alvarez, it'll be otherworldly. Let's just say that. Whether they're on the road or at home, we know the type of energy that can be supplied by Francisco Alvarez. He's just that type of impact player. But Frank, you are a huge Francisco Alvarez fan. You have been, again, like we've said, since the day that he was born, right?
Yeah.
You were like 73 at the time.
Mhm.
But what are you seeing from Francisco Alvarez that is just so much more encouraging as compared to whatever the hell we were seeing when he came back from injury?
Yeah, I'm seeing the person I fell in love with when he was in Brooklyn. I'm seeing a guy who's going up there and is pulling the ball to left field and destroying the baseball, doing what he does best, his special ability being maximized. And to me, I haven't seen him looking to go opposite field at all. He's not even trying. He's just pulling that thing and it's going somewhere. So I do wonder how that happened though. Like I know how he did it, but I wonder if there was some kind of conversation by somebody, whether it was his hitting coach, whether it was himself or the manager or David Stearns, or if somebody was like, you know what, you've tried this new approach and it's not working right now. Just go do what you do that you've done so well in the past. And he's like, okay, I got this. And then he just goes.
Prospects should be doing when they get called up,
So him doing what he's done before, like I can't say I'm surprised. If anything, I'm relieved because I'm like, okay, this is more so what I know from him and what I was expecting from him. So now I'm just much more at ease. Like, okay, that's the Alvarez I know and love. And for me, it just drives me nuts still just thinking about it that they tried to make him something he's not by trying to make him this contact hitter, this opposite field hitter, because it's such a luxury to have a catcher with elite power. Why would you try to kind of take that away to a certain extent? Like that you have like this thing that not a lot of teams have. Why would you not try to embrace that and try to really maximize that? Because it's like if you wanted to try to turn a Starling Marte into that kind of because he's not a prolific home run hitter, or you want to do that with Iglesias or Bader or these guys that don't have insane power, that's fine. I mean, you're trying to like maximize their hitting tools and what they have. But someone who already has proven power, elite pull power, why would you try to turn them into something else? I just don't understand that at all, especially a guy who's coming off of a rookie season. Like, if you're just worried about pitch selection and things like that, he's going to learn that with time and experience and reps. So I feel like just letting him do what he does and seeing a pitch that he likes in hitters counts and just annihilating it for home runs, that's what he should have been doing all along. And it really changes the dynamic of the if he is doing that. It really just makes it like you don't see a lot of teams where you have this like catcher that has this crazy power that you have to be careful with, especially hitting on the lower half of the order. It just changes everything for this Mets team. So I am just extremely excited that we're seeing it again, and I hope it never goes away. I don't want to see the opposite field stuff again. Just let him be himself and do what he does best.
Yeah, of course. I think that, when it comes to pitch selection, of course, the inner part of the plate usually is the pull, and then, the outer part of the plate usually is opposite field. They hit it where it's pitched. You can do if that's the approach you're going to go with that approach. Go ahead. But there were a lot of situations where I'm seeing middle, and he's just taking it all the way. I am seeing him go the opposite way. I'm seeing him hit these things on the ground. There's a main reason as to why we focus on quality of contact so much. And that is because of, again, pitching like this. He's not going to face Taijuan Walker in the postseason. He's just not going to. But we know that he has the quick enough bat. We know that he has the strength to pull it off, where if he sees a pitch in the zone, he can destroy it. Sometimes I am seeing him, some of these swings that he is taking sometimes. I feel like you could have got a little bit more on that. Sometimes I see that from him, and that is when I talk about like the quality of contact concerns. I feel like at one point there probably was like maybe at one point, I don't know, like starting off in September, because September he's been fantastic. Of course, it started off in Toronto where he started to hit, like slowly get there. Is it possible that maybe they were like, okay, well, it doesn't seem like you have the feel for the power right now with the thumb injury right now. Maybe it just doesn't feel right. And we all know that you're going to take a beating to your thumb going behind the plate as well. So for now, just try to make contact with the ball, put the ball in play, hit line drives. Is it possible that happened, and maybe over time he's been able to feel the power stroke again? Yes. Has there been still some launch angle where he's hitting the ball on the ground? Yes. That comes with the overswing and the huge uppercut. It happens. But when you talk about, yes, if you see a middle in pitch, like a middle pitch, I feel like you should do you need to take every opportunity, especially with the power that he has. He should be destroying it. I'm not saying that, yes, he needs to pull absolutely everything. But what I'm saying is you have the power, maximize it to the way that we know that you can produce. And we know that he can give you 25 homers because he gave you 25 homers last year. I mean, I know that he has the power. He has that, not even just raw power, just game power to give you possibly 30, maybe 35, maybe 40 if he goes on a ridiculous streak. Let's say he has like a Schwarber month. He gives you like 16 home runs in a month. He has that power to give it to you. And not to mention, we all know that catchers don't age well. They don't age well. You don't know how long you're going to have this. Again, he's 22 years old. This is a different discussion. But again, he's behind the plate for like over 200 pitches every single game. And then he's also, swinging a bat that this is a special bat here for a catcher. Let's just say that for a second. I mean, overall production, to get like a 120, 130 bat. I mean, from a catcher, it's unheard of. You only see that from a few catchers. You don't even see that from Real Muto anymore. Maybe you see it from Adley on his best day. We know that Salvador Perez is one of the best hitting catchers in the game. But that's a select few that you're talking about. And it's just an add-on, like you said. Like, that's a premium thing to get from your catcher, because most catchers, they're batting ninth, they're not even hitting their weight. Like that, there's a difference between this type of hitting catcher and the typical hitting catcher that is developed these days. Like we've had quite a few catchers on this team that we do not trust to do the simplest of things. Let's just say that. To go from a Tomas Nido, whose specialty seemed to be bunting a majority of the time, to Francisco Alvarez, who has this incredible power, let's use it. Let's freaking use it. Now, there's another discussion that I want to open here. We know that Luis Torrens he's not been hitting well recently. We know that. But you're going to have to give days off to Francisco Alvarez because it's just how it is with catchers. JD Martinez has been absolutely abysmal. I think that it's time to put Alvarez with the hot bat that he has in the DH position when Luis Torrens starts. I think that that's what you have to look at. And either way, if you want to, I personally wouldn't put Vientos in the DH spot over something like Alvarez, maybe I would put Vientos in there, but also putting Acuna in the lineup when Lindor's back. I mean, there's a different way you got to switch this thing out. But when it comes to the DH position, like right now, the bat's just too like the bat is too hot right now. Where you're like, okay, well, let's just sit him all together. I feel like you got to ride the hot hand of the DH as of right now. And Francisco Alvarez is giving you DH power, especially in this month of September. I don't know how you feel about that. Obviously, Vientos could DH too. We have Winker as well. That's a possibility. Somebody put this, Jazz put this in the chat of Winker as a possibility against right-handed pitching. They have a deep roster to do so. We know that Jose Iglesias is hot. You don't want to keep him out of the lineup. You want to see Acuna play every day for the development of a young player. Lindor coming back. So there is a lot of moving parts there. But when it comes to JD Martinez, I can't put him in a playoff equation right now. What is he, 0 for his last 33? 0 for his last 32? He's been awful. He's just been terrible. So I feel like that's a way. I feel like that's what they need to do now. If Luis Torrens is going to start, I don't know about you how they do that scheme, but Alvarez is too hot to not do it.
Yeah, I think overall my priority would be to try to find a way to get Lindor in the lineup, and I think that would be DHing Lindor with the back situation. I feel like asking him to play the field and do all this other stuff, I think that's probably asking too much, and I feel like if you get him in there as a DH, he'll give you much more than what JD Martinez is giving you, especially since he's the leadoff hitter too. I feel like, again, just having Lindor out there to set that tone, set that example, while still having Acuna in the lineup. Because to me, right now, like you said, all the hot bats should be playing. So for me, it's like having Acuna play, having Iglesias play, even having Tyrone Taylor play is more of a priority to me right now than having JD Martinez get at bats. JD Martinez has not gotten a hit since September 9th, and because like you said, it's been 0 for 30 something. So it's just been going on, and even his at bats, especially lately, they're just straight up in the ground. It's just a bunch of ground balls, and with AD as a DH in the middle of the order with runners on base with no speed, you cannot be hitting the ball on the ground because those are double plays. So like he's doing the one thing that he really cannot afford to be doing. So I just, like you said, I wouldn't have him in the equation at all. Winker, he's been all right, but like I said before, Acuna has given me more power than Winker has in a small amount of time when he's not supposed to be doing that, and Winker is. So I haven't been overly impressed with Winker. He got a hit yesterday, but it hasn't been like this amazing bat. Tyrone Taylor's been outplaying him as well. So
yeah,
I just feel like right now, when it comes down to the very, very end, just give me all the hot bats. So like you said, if for one game Alvarez has to DH and Lindor's DHing the rest, I'm good with that, because if Alvarez's bat is hot, I still feel like there is something for player development overall, like you were saying with Acuna, where it's like, here's a young player who's had a rough season, now has finally got it going. You need to capitalize on that and have him keep stringing together those good games in that rhythm. So for me, I definitely would be all for it. This way he just continues being there, because right now he's one of the best power bats in the lineup, especially with how inconsistent Alonso has been. Alvarez has been one of the best power sources, so I don't know why you'd be trying to take that out at all. So it's just gotten really bad with JD Martinez, where it's like his overall, like he's been so bad lately that his overall numbers have plummeted so much. He's getting very close to getting under 100 on his OPS plus and becoming a less than league average bat for the entire season, because of how bad this stretch has been, how long the stretch has been going on. Because despite the 0 for 30 whatever, this whole second half has not been good for him, especially from the power department. So you have guys now like Tyrone Taylor, whose OPS plus is just as good as JD Martinez right now. So for me, again, I'd just be playing the hot bats. So I'm all for, if you want Alvarez to DH like one game or two games because of rest and things like that, even though you might not have to, because you have the off day today, and then the rest of the games are night games. Besides maybe Sunday might be like a day game. So you have like a bunch of night games coming up. It's not like that day after night game stuff. And honestly, we'll probably get to in the Atlanta preview, but we don't know what's happening Thursday with a hurricane coming, and that game might not even happen. So if there's a doubleheader, then sure, Torrens gets one of them. But there's no reason why maybe Alvarez doesn't play just about every single game. And I feel like when you get to that Sunday point, last game of the season, if it means something, I feel like Alvarez has to play that game too. So you might not have to rest him anymore.
Yeah, of course. I mean, still they're kind of lining up as to where, there's no like day night or whatever. That's a little bit of like the resting. But when you're talking about, maybe like the preference of catcher or something, like if there's somebody who prefers this guy over this guy. But again, Alvarez is one of those guys that most of
Yeah.
them prefer as well. So I mean, I think that he's going to get a majority of the playing time. He's catcher number one. I mean, catcher number two is Luis Torrens at this current moment. But I feel like if you're getting the extra bat in there, I don't want to see in terms of hot and cold with how streaky this offense is. I don't want to see a cold bat in there. I just don't. I really don't. As like aside from like Nimmo who has to be in there every day, and then once Lindor comes back, whether he's hot or cold, he needs to be in there. Alonso pretty much as well from those three. But like JD Martinez, he hasn't done shit. Like right now, I don't care. Like right now, he should be in the pinch hitting duty right now. And if he gets something for pinch hitting, maybe he does get a start the next day or something. If it's like against a lefty or somebody who has a really good history against. But when you're talking about like just, I mean, JD Martinez's production has been nothing. Like he is providing absolutely nothing. And right now the Mets they can outlast that because they have the 28 players right now. It's a good problem to have of what they have of a lot of pieces right now. I mean, could you imagine 2 years ago where we're talking about, oh, well, where do we play Guillorme? Because he's here. And where do we play this guy? And where do we get, Travis Jankowski in here? And where do we get... No, you have actual guys who can contribute on a daily basis if they are red hot. Like right now we're looking at it with Tyrone Taylor. I mean, geez, like he's red hot right now. He's swinging an incredible bat. We already know that he could possibly cool off at any point because he's just Tyrone Taylor. He's the fourth outfielder. But it's a bat you need in the lineup as of right now and compared to somebody like Winker who's kind of cooled off recently. So when you're talking about a deep team like this, there's other comments of talking about like, bringing up, Gilbert or whatever. I just don't think that there's really a spot there. And also it's kind of a lost season for him. So they most likely will. Maybe they do call him up instead of somebody like Eddie Alvarez, who's not postseason eligible, who I want to get into in a second. But, maybe it's a possibility that happens. I don't know. But the hot bat needs to be played. They need to get this. Like, it can't just be like, oh, this guy has to play as of right now. Whoever is hot, they need to be in the lineup right now. Who's ever swinging a hot bat. I don't want to hear any matchup crap or this guy has this guy. I don't want to see JD Martinez in the lineup tomorrow. I just don't. I don't want to see that. Game 2, I don't want to see that either unless he does anything in like pinch hitting or whatever. I don't want to see it. It's kind of the same way that I've felt about DJ Stewart recently. Like that, it's the same shit. Like it's just like, and JD Martinez, again, he's had a great career. He's not DJ Stewart by any means. But right now, again, we have to accept the reality. He's 36 years old. He's not, it's not just going to come by or there's some upside to relate it to. He's just not been good. I'm not saying his career's over. He's just not providing anything. And we're at a point where you just need results. They need to win. They don't have a choice. So let's just say that. I mean, I just wouldn't put him in the lineup. Now, speaking of roster construction, I do want to talk about one other piece, and that being the other kid. Brett Baty has been back in AAA after, of course, being sent down, but he came back from an injury where he fractured his index finger, I think, maybe his ring finger. I'm not sure. And he came out of the game. He had a fracture. It looked like he was out for like 4 to 6 weeks, but then he came back into the Syracuse lineup. Carlos Mendoza, when that did happen, when he was on there, like, I don't know, it was like like a week ago, he said that it's not out of the cards of him returning to the roster. Now, that obviously doesn't really have anything to do as to where we need Baty on this roster. Baty would complete this and take us to the World Series. No, I think that comes from the thought of Eddie Alvarez is not postseason eligible because he was not in our organization at like a certain time. So that would probably be, the way to switch this thing out. When it comes to Brett Baty, we already know that we've had tons of discussions about him. He does not have the third base job. That goes to Mark Vientos. Mark Vientos has earned that. The equation of where Baty fits in, I don't see it, but as an extra bat off the bench, I mean, it looks as fine because I feel like he was going to be the guy who gets called up if he was healthy at September 1st. So they probably were seeing a possibility of bringing him up. But the current situation with Baty, plugging him in here, I don't know how you feel about it, Frank, but like, again, I get it with the eligibility, but I'm over it. Like, I'm just over it. Like, I just don't see the need for him at all right now. I don't know if that's how you feel, but outfielders, infielders, balancing it out. I don't know, but that's just how I feel with it. I just don't see the reason for it.
Yeah, I think at this point it's too late in the season to really consider him a factor for me. I feel like they've gotten so far and are playing really good right now without him that it's like you said, where is the actual opportunity? Like, what am I replacing him for? Because like you said, you're not taking him out for Vientos. Do you want him to DH over Winker? Maybe, or you want to have Baty start third and have Vientos DH instead of Winker to get a lefty bat in there. You could, but we just haven't seen the bat on the major league level be productive enough to warrant that. So if he was closer to the guy in Syracuse that's always hitting home runs as a OPS above 800, sure, but we haven't really seen that. I feel like that's the only thing he's really providing for me is just the fact that he's left-handed bad because most of these guys on this team are right-handed. And with certain matchups, like we said, guys with sliders, especially like when they're facing a guy like Schwellenbach in the first game of the series, I feel like maybe having another lefty out there isn't the worst thing, but like we said, at the expense of who? Because that's the bigger question is that, like you said, you're not taking Tyrone Taylor out right now if he's swinging a good bat. You're not taking out Nimmo. You're not taking out Alvarez. So, like, most of the guys, and Marte's been playing pretty good, too. So, you're not really taking any of those guys out. So, you're also going to be facing Chris Sale in this series. You're going to be facing Max Fried. You're not going to put him against those lefties. So, I feel like there's just not too many opportunities for him right now. And the difference between him and Eddie Alvarez is that at least Alvarez gives you that good defensive replacement at second base, and he gives you speed as a late game runner. So Baty doesn't provide either one of those either. So I just don't really see all that much value right now.
Yeah, of course. And I think that the only thing that's holding it over Eddie Alvarez's head is just the postseason eligibility. But of course, they're going to have to cut this roster right back down to 26, I believe. And I feel like when I talk about Brett Baty, it seems a little bit extreme when I talk about him. But and I'll always exaggerate a lot of things, but like I don't really exaggerate when it comes to Brett Baty. I really don't. When I'm talking about like somebody who I feel like I see nothing, I'm actually like accurately talking about how I feel about Brett Baty. I'm not even like exaggerating in the fact, and even if I do want to exaggerate and sound like, certain people from a certain radio station, like this is just like, I would much rather, if Baty was the last option to be this 26th man on the postseason roster, I'd rather just have that spot empty. I really would, because I don't see anything that would keep him in this lineup. There's no reason to have him here. Obviously, he's a young player. He can still improve. But we've seen 600 plate appearances from this guy. He's proven to you that he's not a major league hitter. He just isn't. He's not a major league player either. Yes, I know his defense. We had such highlights from him early on in the season. The only thing that he has redeeming is that he plays a better defensive third baseman. He's a better defensive third baseman than Mark Vientos. But you're not taking Vientos' bat out of the lineup. You already have the dilemma of Acuna, who's red hot if Lindor comes back. You're not taking Jose Iglesias out of the lineup. So in what way would he actually provide? And not to mention, it's like, is he going to provide anything when he's out there? You're not going to put him in left field. Like, why would you put him in left? You're not going to, like, again, DHing. Yes, I know JD Martinez hasn't been good, But Winker, I'd much rather have in there, to be honest, because he can actually, like, I don't know, have good pitch selection as compared to somebody like Brett Baty. I see nothing in Brett Baty. I really don't. I just don't. And whether that sounds like an actual over exaggeration, it's just not. I just don't see it. I don't see a major league hitter out of Brett Baty that he was supposedly supposed to be. And I literally, I can't think of anything less. I can't think of a player I want any less here than Brett Baty. Maybe that's DJ Stewart, because like DJ Stewart I'm tired of. But like, there's not really many guys in AAA where I'm like, okay, let's try him instead of Brett Baty. Like, he has earned the right to play in AAA for the rest of the year. He's earned the right to start next year in AAA, in my opinion. And, you know, when you have another prospect added to the equation in Ronnie Mauricio, maybe there's different questions you got to ask next year. But when it comes to Brett Baty, you know, maybe, I don't know, playing second base or whatever. Like, again, and this is another point. Like, yes, the AAA season just ended. But, like, you know, maybe it's time for Baty to just go home. Like, I'm just saying, like, there's no I don't see any reason to bring him up other than Alvarez is not postseason eligible. Like, I don't see any reason to do that. And not to mention, I don't think you're allowed to do this. I also would probably put on a pitcher instead of him. I don't think you can do that anymore. But, like, at this point, I mean, I just don't see him in the equation. I just don't. This roster is too deep that, like, yeah, he won't get any playing time. And also, it's like, for what reason would they call him up when he hasn't earned shit? Like, he just has not earned anything. The only thing that is attached to his name is his draft stock. That's it. That's all that's attached to his name. And it's all just been wasted away because he's been terrible in the major league level. I'm not trying to say, oh, he's a quad A player, because, yeah, he's still young. I get it. But it's like, what is the reason for him to be added to this when it's going so well, especially with how well it's gone? Like, with even losing Lindor, we're still having the infield go crazy right now. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's how I see it. And, like, it's broken, Brett Baty, at the major league level. We've seen enough. We've seen 600 plate appearances. Maybe he can try again next year. Maybe he shows something in spring training. But right now, I don't see it. I really don't. If there's anything you want to add on this, because I can go on forever. It's just, he's just not good. Like, I just don't think he's good at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't factor him into this year because, like we said, he doesn't have those extra tools of, like, other things he could provide, even if the bat isn't there right now. And as far as his future, if the Mets get a new hitting coach, I'll let him get a try with the new hitting coach. If that doesn't work, then just goodbye. I mean, we've tried everything at this point. Like you say, he's gotten plenty of major league at bats. He had the opportunity to be the third baseman this year. He had a very fair chance at it, and he got outplayed by Vientos. And like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if he got outplayed by Mauricio. And in a week, he's already gone outplayed by Acuna, especially from the power department. So, yeah. You know, it's just like you've had. Like, there have been players who have done more in less amount of time than you when you're older and have the higher prospect ranking that he had at one point.
I mean, I don't really know what else they can really do at this point. I mean, it's just, I'm done with the golden boy. I'm done with the hierarchy. Mark Vientos has proven that he should be here. Brett Baty is not. And that's the final thing that I'll say about that. Now, speaking of, other players that are in the organization, let's get into the injury report.
Don't you want to talk about McGill as well?
Oh, I'll get to McGill. Don't worry. We'll have a little bit of a Q&A at the end, because we'll go a little bit longer, guys. Because this is a big series coming up. But as for Kodai Senga, he threw one inning for AAA Syracuse the other night, and he experienced tricep tightness during that minor league assignment, which means he will not be returning to the Mets rotation during the regular season. There was a slight chance he did return, but it didn't happen. It wasn't meant to be. Most likely we will see him next year, or we will see him in a deep playoff postseason run if that does happen. The big one, Francisco Lindor. He has intensified his baseball activities after having a facet injection in his lower back. He is unlikely and has made it clear that he most likely will not be playing pain-free for the rest of the season. The Mets are hopeful that he returns to the lineup tomorrow on Tuesday. Tuesday is not spelled correctly. I apologize for that. It happens. Typos happen. But again, it right now is kind of just neutral as to what's going to happen with Francisco Lindor. We don't know. It seemed like he may have been available to pinch hit last night. Did not happen. But again, we'll see what happens. Him regarding his health, how they manage this. Maybe he does DH. Maybe he does play shortstop. But again, like we've said with Acuna and Iglesias sitting as hot as they have been, we'll see how they pull up that combination. Paul Blackburn, he has begun throwing from 90 feet this week, but he has yet to be throwing off of a mound or slope. And Carlos Mendoza did let us know that he most likely will not be returning for the remainder of the 2024 season. With the formula of the Mets rotation right now, it most likely will not happen. He most likely will not return at all this season. Maybe he comes out of the bullpen in a deep postseason run. It's a different story, just like Senga. But right now, we will not be seeing Paul Blackburn for any time soon. Now, let's just say right now, we are taking a breather from Mets playoff run baseball. But 2 years ago, the Mets went into a city called Atlanta. Up 2 games on Atlanta. 3 games set. It was the second to last series. This is the second to last series. This is basically mirroring exactly what happened 2 years ago. Will the Mets be able to flip the script? Boy, I hope so, because again, it's going to be a season-defying series. Let's see if the Mets are going to be able to do so. So the only way that we can do that before it happens is to preview it. So let's get into the biggest series of the year, possibly the biggest series in the history of the franchise, Mets versus Braves, the matchup that we've all been dreading for a long time and expecting. Now, the Mets moved around their rotation to make this look like a playoff series because they need to treat it as such. Luis Severino will get game 1 against one of the best names you will ever hear in Spencer Schwellenbach. That will be at 7:20 tomorrow, Tuesday night, regarding any weather that happens, of course, with the potential hurricane coming up around Atlanta. Personally, I think the Braves just created that just to avoid us clinching on their field. That's just a working theory. I don't know if that's correct. Game 2 will go to David Peterson. Hopefully, he can bounce back in a huge way, going up against, most likely, the Cy Young frontrunner, Chris Sale, who has had an incredible season, and I'm pretty sure dominated the Mets the last time we faced him. But he also had a really good contribution to the next guy that is pitching in Game 3, being Sean Manaea going up against Max Fried, who, if the Braves do get eliminated, that most likely might be Max Fried's last game as a Brave, possibly. I don't know. Is it? I think he's a free agent at the end of the year, so maybe it's big for him. I don't know. But Sean Manaea has also been pitching pretty well as well. So those are your pitching matchups, of course. We know the Braves. We know this team pretty much like the back of our hands. Not in a good way, because they have bested us for a long time. The Mets, let's just say it has not been fun to face the Braves for a long time. It's always been stressful. It always seems like they get the upper hand every single time. The Mets now have a chance to flip the script. And if they do flip the script, if they win this series, they will clinch a playoff spot in Atlanta, on their field, right in front of Braves fans. And we hope that that does happen. That would be cool. Not for just the pettiness, but we just want to make the playoffs. That would be awesome. And all scenarios are on board. And I do want to talk about the clinching scenarios before we get into previewing this one. Excuse me. I don't know if my cam's been going in and out on this one. I don't know why it's been doing that. But of course, the Mets' magic number at this current moment to clinch a playoff spot is 5. That is the key number to look at. David Wright is our magic number at this current moment for the Mets to clinch a playoff berth. So you take a look at the current scenarios of the upcoming series. Now, the NL East division is pretty much wrapped up. The Mets held off the Phillies from clinching it on their field, but the Phillies only just need to win one game. But mathematically, the Mets still can win it. That's why I still have it up there. But they're going to need a lot. They're going to have to win out, and the Phillies are going to have to lose out. Most likely won't happen, but again, mathematically, still a thing, so I just put it up there. But as for the National League wildcard, which is basically the main thing that the Mets are contending for at this current moment, the season series is one of the key pieces of information. The Mets and the Braves are 5-5 on the series. They have played the season series. They have played 10 games. And basically, out of all of these clinching scenarios, it would definitely favor the Mets to win this series. Maybe even sweep them, I don't know, for just bragging rights. But taking 2 out of 3 is the main look at it because they will have the tiebreaker, which will be the Mets' advantage over the Braves. If the Mets were to win the first 2 games of this series, they will end up being 4 games ahead with 4 games left. But the best thing that Atlanta would be able to do is tie us. But the Mets, in that case, would have the tiebreaker. So 2 out of 3 from Atlanta, the Mets will clinch a berth. If Atlanta takes 2 out of 3, Atlanta would get the tiebreaker, winning the season series 7-6. And that will bring the Mets' magic number down to 3, meaning that the amount of Mets wins and Braves losses would have to equal 3 for the rest of the season for the Mets to clinch a playoff spot, most likely that last wildcard spot. Now, worst case scenario, which we saw happen 2 years ago. It's happened before, so we got to put it out there. If Atlanta sweeps the Mets will most likely clinch the wildcard berth only with a sweep of Milwaukee and Atlanta loses a series to Kansas City. Or they would have to win a series in Milwaukee and Atlanta would have to get swept by Kansas City. So a lot would have to happen. Lots of moving parts. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation, of course. Going into this Atlanta series, again, this is the biggest series of the year. We knew that it was going to come down to this no matter what. Whether the Mets had a lead or not, this was going to be it. This was going to be the game. These were going to be the games that determined the Mets season of them making the playoffs. We've talked about Atlanta this year. They are the most vulnerable they have ever been. Tons of injuries. They've had underperformance from some of their key stars. This is their chance because we've talked about it. The Mets, regarding of the Braves, whether the Mets be able to sustain a Bill winner or not, they're going to have to find a way to get through the Braves. And the Braves are going to be back next year. So it's not like the Braves franchise is completely cooked. They have young players out the wazoo. So it all comes down to this, but the Mets are in the driver's seat. Let's just say that. They were in the driver's seat 2 years ago. It was rough how it ended. Confidence level going into this series, keys to this series, tons to unpack here. Let's just say that. I mean, this is it. This is it. This is what we have played all the way down to. And we can't express how big this is. Frank, what do you think? Every single inner thought going into this Atlanta series, the House of Horrors, as we like to call it.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, of course, it has to be in Atlanta again. I mean, we can't get the games in New York in late September because why could we? This is, like you said, now 2 times in a row. And I mentioned this to you off stream last time, but I still bothers me that MLB lets the home teams decide what times the games are. Because the Braves, they purposefully decide that the Thursday night game is at night instead of usually a getaway game is a day game because the other team has to travel. So it's just like a common courtesy that you do. But since the Braves are home for the weekend and the Mets have to travel to Milwaukee, Atlanta puts that as a night game to try to just hurt the Mets a little bit over the weekend. So, of course, they had to do little underhanded tactics here and there. No surprise. But you're going up against really good pitching, like we said. And you show the different scenarios. I'm not going to be greedy. I'm not expecting a sweep, but man, would I love to win the series. That would just make everything so much easier to just at least win this series. And to me, the way they're going to do it is winning game 1 and game 3. I feel like with how good Chris Sale has been this season, I wouldn't count on beating the Cy Young Award winner, especially since David Peterson hasn't been as great these past couple of starts. But the Mets did win the Chris Sale game in New York when they played last time. And like you showed, they are 5-5 against Atlanta this season. Now, Ozzy Albies is back. Gio Urshela has been playing well for Atlanta, replacing Austin Riley, and they added in Jorge Soler to try to help out with losing Acuna. So overall, they still have a lot of good players on that roster, both hitting and in the pitching department. But it is going to be interesting to see how I feel like
All right, guys. I don't know if Frank dropped out for you guys, but yeah, he's been lagging in and out for this. But here, I'll he's back here. Hold on.
yeah,
I
give her,
think you're
give her that
good. I don't know.
fraud. Give her that other guy. I don't know who that is.
Yeah, I
But
don't know.
so yeah. So anyway,
Yeah, I
as
think
I
you're
was
good.
saying,
You should be good. Yeah, go ahead.
hopefully. Anyway, Acuna is going to be a big story just to kind of see how he plays in front of his brother. And just, I would love to see him stick it back at Atlanta. That would just make for such compelling television. That would be really, really awesome. But the other big key is Lindor. I mean, they didn't try anything in the Philadelphia series. They didn't try to pinch hit. They didn't try to pinch run. They've really tried to protect him. And I feel like it's because of this Atlanta series. It's the biggest series of the year. You feel like you'd want him to be available for this particular series. So I do wonder if, like we talked about, if maybe they even try to DH him. Like, do we see Lindor at all in this series? And like we also said, what are you going to do with the JD Martinez situation? You are facing two lefties in this series, so you can't just say, oh, we'll play Winker. What do you do with JD Martinez? Do you start him? Where do you bat him? That's a big one. And like we talk about every series, can Pete finally step up? Like, can this finally be your good series?
It'd be
Like,
nice, wouldn't it?
this be the one? I mean, that would be great. But I think seeing Brandon Nimmo continue his hot stretch would be great, and then obviously Alvarez as well. So like, you want to kind of just keep doing what you're doing. Like, what's gotten the Mets into the situation they're in right now to be 2 games up in Atlanta, be the best team in baseball since May 30th, is like all these different things, like the really good starting pitching and you having multiple guys in line step up, Iglesias and these guys. They need to do that again. I mean, I feel like overall this season, they've done well against really good teams. I mean, when you think about, we talked about that very scary West Coast trip that they had last month when they had to face San Diego and Arizona, who both were red hot and were not losing series. Then all of a sudden, the Mets split and they beat them in a series. So as much as we've been critical of them this season and they've drove us nuts with some of the losses they had, like against Oakland and Miami and all these different teams, they actually have done pretty good against the good teams. So I
Yeah.
feel like that's kind of the one thing that makes me feel pretty good, is that, like we've been talking about it for so long, you have to feel that every player knows just how big these games are. So I feel like they're going to be coming out there with the full sense of urgency. And I feel like with the way you saw Mendoza manage this Phillies series, as far as like pulling David Pearson early, even though it didn't work, or how much he extended Edwin Diaz, I feel like you're going to see that same sense of urgency from him, because he also knows that this series is make or break. And you, like you said, you win this series, you clinch. So I feel like there is going to be that kind of managing as well, where it's going to be like everything all out. Like, you got to get it done.
I mean, there's no really like anything you can say from this season that kind of decides how this is going to kind of play out. Yes, the Mets are playing great baseball. The Braves is still hung in there, especially with the adversity they have faced. But like, yeah, we're tied 5-5 with them. Like we're tied 5-5 with them this season in the series, single season, the series season series. Jeez, and we're also you know, the tiebreaker was one of the factors 2 years ago. Of course, we ended up tied at 101 wins with Atlanta, and they ended up getting the division. So, but this year, again, like I said, they're 5-5. But also, when you're talking about like these current teams, the Mets are also 45-45 against teams with winning records this year. So you just don't know how this is going to, like, again, it can go in any single direction. And I mean, it's scary, but it's exciting. I mean, this is what you play for. These are the teams you got to get over, to get to the promised land here. And, I think that when you're looking at these certain pitching matchups, they've lined this up like they did like 2 years ago, the best guys available, it has some of the parallels there, but I say that like going into this, the Mets are red hot. Like the Mets are red hot as compared to the team that they were going into Atlanta 2 years ago. It's a lot different of a feel. The Braves are kind of the desperate one at this current moment. If you take the history aside, of course, because you kind of have to when you say that. Right now, this is going to be a series where the Mets are in the driver's seat, and if they could literally just take one game, which they couldn't do 2 years ago, if they could take one game, they're in really good shape. And I do think that game 1 and game 3 are the ones that I think I expect them to win. You never know. We know that David Peterson has had trouble against the Braves in the past. Like that's the team that has bugged him the most. So that's kind of I don't know. That's kind of an interesting choice. I get it. But the other option probably was Jose Quintana. Quintana's been pitching good, which I was expecting them to probably put Quintana in there maybe for I don't know if
he's got the legendary streak.
Yeah, he's got the legendary streak now. So that was weird. But they had the off day as to where they can do that. And this is another thing as to where, people that talk about I don't trust Peterson in big games. You might, I mean, I get it. I understand it. He's come through a lot for us this year. We already know my deal with David Peterson. It's already one blown. But the deal with this is that, you got to have both sides show up as well. Yes, they're going to be playing really good pitching. But this Schwellenbach guy, I mean, he's never been in these big scenarios before. I don't think so. He's a rookie, right?
I went to the Mets Braves game where he pitched and he shut him down. So
yeah, he did. But that was like months ago. Again, it's like it's a situation where the pressure, you see who can handle it. I mean, this is a playoff series, and that's how they have to show it. And we'll see how they're going to be able to do it. I hope that Acuna is one of the factors as well. I hope that's the deal. Again, I think that the confidence level is higher than it's been ever going into Atlanta. I hope that they fulfill the prophecy, of course. I asked you guys in the poll in our YouTube chat. For those of you who are watching on Twitter, best way to interact with us is most likely through YouTube, because usually all of those comments come in. There's always been a problem with StreamYard, with Twitter comments coming in. It just happens. But when it comes to this poll, 21% of you are saying that the Mets are going to sweep this thing. 64% of you are saying that the Mets are going to take 2 out of 3. 13% of you are saying that the Braves take 2 out of 3. And 2% of you say that the Braves are going to sweep us. So, I mean, 2% of you...
I like it.
2% of you don't have confidence and think that it's just going to be a full-on repeat of 2022. But 98% of you believe that the Mets will actually win a game in this series, which isn't the worst-case scenario, but the best-case scenario, let's just say, would be a series win. 2% are most likely Braves fans. I would not... I would... listen, again... And as for the scenario, just to push in, one of our fellow creators here, Talking Mets with Rob, coming in, also talking about Arizona being a factor as well. If they don't play well, that could determine if the Mets or Braves, making both teams, have the tiebreaker over the Diamondbacks. That would give them an advantage too. The Mets are currently tied with the Diamondbacks, so technically, right now, since they have the tiebreaker over Arizona, they're in the second wild card spot at this current moment. So maybe, this doesn't matter as to, okay, this is the last spot. These are the teams that get in. It's possible that you're watching Arizona and seeing if they can win or lose or whatever for that scenario. I don't see the Mets gaining any ground on San Diego. I don't see that happening.
San Diego has the Dodgers, no?
Do they play the Dodgers?
I believe they do. I thought that was the Padres-Dodgers kind of last chance.
Again, I feel like it would just have to be very timely. It would have to be very timely. I think the only way that they would have a chance to pass San Diego and probably have like a repeat of what happened 2 years ago against San Diego at Citi Field is if they sweep the Braves. Like, I feel like that's the only way that it's possible for them to catch San Diego. But again, San Diego already has a 3-game advantage. So, San Diego, I believe they kind of just have to win tomorrow, and they're in.
Yeah,
I think they're just technically
they have Padres Dodgers. They're 3 games behind the Dodgers, so you'd think that they'd want to maybe try to win the division. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like if the Padres do bad against, things get weird. I mean, like, I feel like
it could happen.
The Padres do bad against the Dodgers, then how much are they trying against Arizona? I don't know, but if they do well against the Dodgers, then maybe they are trying. So, and that's the same thing for the Mets with the Brewers, is that the Brewers are in a very weird spot where they're probably going to be lining up their pitching, I would imagine, for the playoffs, or are they trying to, maybe because they could be playing the Mets. So there's like a lot of different ways. Like, you don't really know like what every team's motives and priorities are. So a lot of things could go in different directions.
We also could have one of these scenarios, which is kind of weird, where we go to Milwaukee, we finish out the season there, and then we stay there for the playoffs because we would play Milwaukee in the playoffs. That would be actually kind of funny. Not gonna lie. But again, you're probably not going to be facing the same pitchers.
No.
Yeah, there's no travel, so you're fully rested again. You're probably not going to face the same pitchers that you do with the Brewers, because not just because of how they're going to line up for the postseason, but also the Brewers already clinched the division. They're already in, so they don't really have that much urgency as of right now. I personally don't want this to come down to the Brewers. I want the Mets to take this series. Like, the best case scenario, 2 out of 3 from the Braves in Atlanta. We know it's a house of horrors. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. We already know. Brewers are a good team. Whether you're talking about it from them not having anything to play for, they're trying to rest their starting pitchers. I saw some stuff about that. How like they're trying to limit the innings of some of their starting pitchers to keep them fresh, maybe out of the bullpen, to give them some bulk in the playoffs. Yes, but again, that bullpen is really good too. Like, you're going to be facing good pitching no matter what. And even though this is a way different team than we saw on opening day against the Brewers, I mean, this started with the Brewers, right? This started, the start of the 0-5, that started with the Brewers. This is, Stern's old team as well. We know that's a finished product. That's a good team. Right? I'm not saying that they won't be able to take one game from them, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know about that. And then you also have this factor as well. I'm just saying, we've seen them get swept by the Brewers before. I'm just saying, they don't really have much luck in Milwaukee as well. Even though they did clinch in Milwaukee 2 years ago, they have not had much luck in Milwaukee as to just the overall history. They haven't had much luck in Atlanta, but I'm just saying, it'd be better for them to take that series in Atlanta. Let's just say that. Now, we're going to stay on for a little bit more of any other topics that you guys may have for us. Any questions that we want to pull up, we'll just star them and just kind of like do this.
Well, how
Another
about
thing we
the
can.
storm potentially? I mean, how that could affect
Oh,
things. Like,
it could.
if you miss the game Thursday and you don't have an off day Friday, I mean, how does that whole work out? I mean, could they be so anticipating a storm that they automatically do a doubleheader on Wednesday? Would they potentially extend the season to go Monday and you have to travel back to Atlanta? Like, it does get kind of weird there because where are you going to make up the game?
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's a possibility the Mets win the first two games and it doesn't even
And
matter.
then
Maybe that
I mean,
happens.
yeah, that
I
would
would
be
love to
really
see a
helpful.
scenario where the game just gets moved to City Field and the Braves are considered the home team. That would be fucking awesome. I would
That'd be a good
actually
one.
die laughing if that happened. But again, I just think that this hurricane's fake. I think they're just trying to dodge us. And it's just not good. Other factors we can put in for game two, Chris Sale did have a velo drop last week. And they are worried about Sale's arm, which it's a proper worry because he's had these
Yeah.
injuries in the past. Like that's something that you can definitely worry about. And maybe they do try to limit him. Maybe like, if he goes, they're trying to just get 5 innings out of him. We'll see what happens. I don't know. It all really just depends on how Peterson performs. Like that's really how it comes
Yeah.
down to. Because if the velo drop is a factor and the Mets are able to get on him, Peterson's got to keep the lead. That's the main factor.
But I feel like that's the one start where they would push him because they're trying to get in. Like they're on the outside looking in. So you feel like if there was one time they are going to push Sale, it would be that start.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, he's pitched like the ace there. We know Schwellenbach has had a really good season as well. We know Max Fried, what he's capable of as well.
Of course.
I think, you know, this can go either way. I mean, we know it could go either way. It could go south. It could go the Mets' way. But like, this is what we were preparing for. And I think that at some point, the Mets have to just say, enough is enough. We're done getting kicked around by the Braves at this point. It's enough. And I think that, you know, at one point, let's just say, I think, at one point, the Braves have owned us for a long time. It's time to take it back from them. Like at one point, they got to do it. The Mets can be ahead of them as much as they want in the regular season by game 158. But when it comes to when they need to beat them and when they need to best them, they have to come up big. And that's why I always talk about 2022, 101 win season. Yeah, great season, awesome. But where were they when we needed them to come up big? They were nowhere to be found. And they fell apart. I've talked about this before, just overall with players, even teams. When it comes to Max Scherzer, how like we talked about with him. Yes, he had a great regular season in his first year here. But where were you when we needed you? 7 runs against the Padres in game 1. So that's all you're going to be really be remembered by. And then it all just went downhill from there. So again, in those big moments, which are postseason moments, how does that come through? Now, somebody asked about Tyler McGill earlier. Horizontal break on his 2-seam. Now, of course, you want extra run when it comes to sinkers, and it seems like he's been utilizing that a lot more. And I have some data here as for that. Now, his sinker has not really have been much effectiveness as to usage, but recently as he came back from AAA, I would say the overall usage of it just to like kind of tunnel with other pitches, certain breaking pitches as well. Let's just say that. I mean, the overall glove side run that you get from Tyler McGill, I mean, what you could get from him, it's it could be unstoppable against left-handed hitters. Let's just say that. And that's what it's kind of been since he's come back. Overall with McGill, it's all really has to do with consistency. Like at one point, sometimes he has it, sometimes he doesn't. When you're talking about stuff plus ratings, or you're talking about all these grade systems, I'm pretty sure we talked about this off stream before the stream started. Like yesterday, McGill's stuff graded better out than Paul Skeens yesterday for some of the systems. Yes. The whole factor with Stuff Plus is that, again, these are more of pitching characteristics. It's not where they locate it. It's not how they get it over the plate. If they give up hard contact, it's more of just like how it is expected, given the certain build, given the certain release height, the extension. You get ridiculous extension from a tall man like Tyler McGill, right? So I think that, if he's going to be able to utilize it and be this kind of sinker baller type of guy, I mean, that's kind of similar to what Zach Wheeler does. Like that's kind of what he does, right? And I make the joke of like, oh well, he is just Zach Wheeler, so we didn't need to need to bring Zach Wheeler back. But like, there are some models where you look at it and you're like, okay, if he could put this all together, he could be a really good arm. The problem with McGill is that he's become a different pitcher every single time. And that's the problem, that we've seen him bring up this consistency. But the best consistency we've had from him this year has been in September. And that's the biggest month that we need him to come through, especially with, the absences of Christian Scott, Kodai Senga, Paul Blackburn, who he filled in for the rotation. He's taken it and he's ran with it. He hasn't been perfect, but still, he looks sharp. He does look sharp. I'm not saying like, okay, this is my game one starter, but it's been good. I mean, I don't know if you want to add anything with Tyler McGill, of what you've seen. I know that Frank, you have a big analytical breakdown on him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think it was a really good question, because I was watching the way he was kind of utilizing it to kind of come inside a little bit as well, which I thought was a nice thing to see, is that especially against guys like Trey Turner, they're just trying to move the horizontal break this way, not able to square you up, because we know in McGill, like we've talked about, when he's hanging pitches, that's definitely where things get more challenging for him. But I think also the fact that he was going against Zach Wheeler on Sunday Night Baseball, like you don't want the Phillies to clinch, and things were looking bad in the first inning where he loaded up the bases, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh my gosh, here we go, it's going to be a bad McGill start. But we've seen that a few times in a row now, where it's like once he gets his groove, he's ready to go. And that was also a thing that Wheeler was well known for, is that he would have outings before he became dominant where it'd be a little rough in the beginning, but then he'd get on a roll and set a bunch of batters consecutively. So McGill has been able to do that compared to the first go around this year, where he would start good and then end bad. He's been able to reverse that, and it's just been, like you said, a big key for them. And in that case, he's technically their 5 starter, because he's the guy that got called up last to be in the rotation, and he's going against the Phillies ace, and the Mets end up winning the ball game. So I feel like all in all, and again, credit goes to Maton and Budo and these other guys, but overall, he kept them in there. So I think that definitely says a lot just to how good this Mets rotation has been this month.
Yeah, of course. And listen, Game for War saying, for 2 years, I've said someone needed to teach McGill a sinker to bring those home runs down. I mean, I think he's had the sinker the entire time, but I think that just utilizing it as kind of like more of a velocity pitch and not just a contact pitch, I think that's the main reason as to why he's had the success of it, because he is a strikeout pitcher. Like, that's what he specializes in. He will give up your hard contact, like a Corbin Burns does, or like even Zach Wheeler does sometimes, where he leaves something over the plate. Or maybe even simpler, Ryan Stanek in that way, where he's pounding the strike zone with velocity and coming after you. When it comes to McGill and the sinker, yes, I would like to see more ground balls from him, obviously, because we know that even though fly balls usually die on the warning track at Citi Field, let's just say that there's definitely a barrel zone in that stadium. There really is. If you leave a pitch up in one certain instance with the command issues that we've seen Tyler McGill have, he's going to be in trouble. Let's just say that. And that's kind of what we have seen. And I've also, talked about, giving him a cutter because of just how inconsistent his slider tends to be. I still just I've never seen this guy throw a good slider before, but it's just at one point, I feel like they never really, for a second, they didn't really teach him that, like, okay, sliders need to cut too, even though they're also called sliders. And then you also have a cutter that needs to slide a little bit as well through the bottom half of the zone. Like, I feel like they had to piece these things together. and he looks good. I'm not writing him in for the Cy Young next year. Actually, yes, I am. But, I think that the assortment of weapons that he does have, we know he has 8 different pitches or whatever. It seems like he's only using 6 now, which is fine. I feel like the secondary stuff needs to get better in the offseason. But when it comes to the velocity, empty the tank. Let's empty. I mean, it looks like we're using a lot of 4 seams, and I like the sinker usage as well to keep the contact. But he's been 55% fastball since he's come back. I mean, he's using a lot of velo, and I'm glad that he is, because he has. I'm pretty sure they said it on the broadcast in ESPN. It doesn't really worth much, but it's actually true. He's got an angry fastball. He does. So use it. Let's use it. I mean, attack these hitters. And then, of course, the sinker for the soft contact. I mean, it's really been good to see. And again, it's a small sample. He hasn't really gone like very deep into games, but he's been able to keep the team in these games. And I'm just saying, like, I don't want to open up the McGill versus Peterson debate, but just saying, when it's mattered in September, McGill's been better. McGill has given you those results. I know that Peterson has had a really good season, not debunking anything of that, but when you're talking about like big game pitchers, I don't know, man. We've talked about not trusting Peterson in big games. I mean, I don't know. I don't say I trust McGill more than anybody else, like Severino or Manaya, in that sense, but I don't know. Maybe I'd put him over Quintana because Quintana worries me. Even though he has the scoreless inning streak, he still just will continue to worry me. I don't know what is going on with my camera right now. But anyways, if there's any other questions in this chat, let us know what you guys think. Again, this is another comment that came in earlier from Rosie saying Mendoza's use of Diaz was very gutsy. We talked about this earlier. But again, Diaz is somebody who has specified that he likes to pitch a lot and he wants to be out there. And if that's what keeps him sharp, so be it. I mean, to have somebody as a high usage reliever for $102 million, that's giving you your money's worth. That's you expect him to want to go out there every day, as compared to, again, like I said, Josh Hader, who's like, oh, I'm a 1-inning guy. That's it. I'm drawing the line in the sand. Also, give me $95 million. So it's a different thing. I think that it definitely does wonders when you have a closer in your they shorten the game, and he shortened the game big time yesterday with the 6-out save. Let's just say that. Anything else we want to put out there? Again, I think that we can only say so much. We've been anticipating this series for a while, but this is all it comes down to. I mean, Frank, anything else you'd like to add that you saw? Any other details?
I'm trying to think of anything else fun that I might have saw. Not at Citi Field exactly, but just New York in general. You see a lot of interesting things, but I feel like overall. Yesterday, like when you saw online the fans celebrating after the game, I'm kind of afraid of, if the Mets actually do make the playoffs, what those celebrations gonna look like, because they hadn't even clinched yet, and everyone's already looking to pop the champagne. So it's just the crowd's been excited. It's been a really crazy year, just with all the different Mets legends that have come about, Grimace and everybody. It's been a crazy year. So we'll see what happens. And even, I mean, how could we forget? Late in the game, that ball that bounces off the third base bag but then falls in front of the bag, that easily most of the time rolls into the outfield, that could have tied up the game. I mean, it's just like you're seeing the weird stuff happen. So all of a sudden, when the Mets get weird things going for them, anything is possible. So I hope we get some luck. Atlanta's not a lucky place for us, but it would be nice to just get a little bit of luck.
Well, let's just say, like I said before, we've been here before. We have been here before. It didn't end well. And even though the Mets ended up going to the playoffs, you just didn't feel well. You didn't feel good. You didn't really feel good. But right now, you're building off of a lot of momentum. You're building off of a huge series win against the first place Phillies, holding them off from winning their division, which it looks like they're going to win tonight because they are winning and beating the Cubs at this current moment. They're up 4-0 in the fourth inning, so most likely that goes away. The Mets lose the division. That's rough. But the Phillies have played phenomenal baseball throughout the entire year. They're going to have they're going to have the first round bye, so maybe they have the layover that the Braves were complaining about last year for the last 2 years.
I mean, the Dodgers still have a game on them, so
the Dodgers, yeah, they might. And I think who has the tiebreaker between the Dodgers and the Phillies?
Oh, that's a tough one. That I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm not sure. Does anybody know? If anybody can tell us, I'm not sure.
I'd have to look at the schedule.
But yeah, I mean that is another thing that we didn't even talk about. I think you actually just said it. The ball just hitting the third base. In any other scenario, that's bouncing off of Vientos' head and going into left field. I mean, right now, just everything is going right at this current moment, and that's usually what happens with these World Series teams recently.
So the Phillies have basically beat the Dodgers every time they've played them. So Philly definitely has the tiebreaker. I think they're like 5 out of 6 on them or something like that. Something crazy.
All right.
The Phillies have destroyed the Dodgers this year.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so and Philly is playing Chicago this week.
And then Dodgers Padres. That's a massive series for the division. So Padres have extreme pressure. I mean, the Dodgers have extreme pressure as well. So it's gonna be good baseball all the way around, especially in the National League. So I mean, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and then we hold the tiebreaker over San Diego as well, I believe, and we hold the tiebreaker over
Arizona too, I think. Yep.
Do we hold the tiebreaker over? I mean, it wouldn't matter, obviously.
I would have to.
Do we have the tiebreaker over the Dodgers? I forget because
I don't think
2 out of 3 in LA.
I don't think
we won 2 out of 3 in LA. I remember. How can we forget?
But then they had the infamous series that we did the stream after where they got destroyed by the Dodgers. So I don't think they have that.
That's right.
The Citi Field part did not go well.
But, yeah,
no, the Mets are 2-4 against LA this year, so they don't have the Dodgers.
Yes. Yes. Oh yeah, the Jorge Lopez thing. Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, now it's all coming back to me. Anyways, but it was all smooth sailing from there, so maybe it helped us. So let's just say that. But other than that, it looks like the Cubs are out of the race. They're done.
Yeah.
It's just 4 teams for 3 spots, and 6 games left. Let's see if we can do it. Let's see. We were here 2 years ago. Just remember, we were here 2 years ago, and it didn't end well. Hopefully they can flip the script. Hopefully everyone's more confident. And again, like I said, taking advantage of a Braves team that's a lot more vulnerable as compared to what they were 2 years ago. So, other than that, I think we're going to stop it right here. I feel like we could go on forever and ever anxiously anticipating this series because, again, it's the biggest, in the history of the franchise. The biggest, it's huge, overtaking the Braves for how much they've tormented us. It's big. But we're going to cut it off here. And hopefully the next time when we see you guys, I don't know if we'll go live if they clinch and win win the series right afterwards. I don't know if we will. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll wait for after the series. I still haven't made that decision. But the next time we see you guys, hopefully the Mets are in a playoff spot and they clinch a playoff berth. It's the final stretch, folks. Here it is, what we've been waiting for. For those of you in here live, for those of you watching on playback, for those of you listening on audio in the future, thank you so much.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, okay. I'm so sure. I'd love to see that. He you know what he would do? And for those of you on audio, you're asking, have the Rhino do a solo show. You know what he would do? He would literally be like, okay, this is my post game. It'll last 12 minutes, and he's like, yep, that's all I got to say. And he's just out of here. Like there's no prolonged anything. But again, that's his thing. But anyways, make sure to hit the subscribe button if you have not already to the Mets Weekly channel. For those of you watching on Twitter, again, it most likely is better if you would like to be in the conversation live with us to be on YouTube, to switch over here because your comments come in a little bit smoothly. And yeah, playoff baseball. Again, it's huge. And audio versions dropping of the show 9 a.m. the following day. Make sure to follow Mets Weekly on TikTok and on X, all of us individually, including the aforementioned Rhino himself, Andrew Acevedo, our third Mike, who is not here today. And of course, big series coming up. Like I said many, many times, very, very important. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you guys next time.